It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon at Daisy's Diner, a small, modest restaurant nestled on the corner of Maple and 8th Street. The lunch crowd had come and gone, leaving behind a calming hum of dishes clinking and the faint tune of a jazz saxophone playing over the radio. The place smelled of buttery biscuits and fresh coffee, comforting, warm, like a hug in the form of scent. Behind the counter stood James, a 29-year-old black waiter who had worked at Daisy's for nearly 5 years. His smile was his trademark, soft, sincere, the kind that made people feel seen. He was known by the locals for remembering their orders by heart and for always checking in, not just to ask how the food was, but how their life was. James wasn't rich. In fact, he was barely making ends meet himself. His mother was ill back home in Georgia, and part of every paycheck he earned went straight to her medicine. Yet, despite his struggles, kindness lived in him effortlessly, like it was stitched into the very fabric of his soul. On that particular day, the bell above the diner door jingled gently, and in stepped a woman who didn't quite look like she belonged there. She wore a faded coat 2 sizes too big, buttoned all the way up even though it was a mild spring day. Her shoes were scuffed, her fingers nervously clutched a worn-out purse, and her eyes, those gray, stormy eyes, darted around the room, filled with hesitation and weariness. James noticed her right away. She walked slowly to a booth in the far corner and sat down, head bowed. For the next 15 minutes, she didn't pick up the menu. She just sat there, trying to blend into the shadows, as if praying nobody would ask her to leave. Finally, James approached, gentle as always. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said with that signature smile. "Can I get you started with something? Maybe coffee? Water?" The woman looked up, startled, her lips trembling slightly. She hesitated, then nodded. "Water, please. Just water." James brought it over, along with a warm bread roll. "On the house," he said before she could protest. The woman clutched the bread like it was gold. As time passed, James watched her quietly. She kept looking at the menu, but didn't seem to decide. Her fingers kept going in and out of her purse, and her eyes flicked toward the exit a few times. Eventually, James approached her again. "Ma'am, you can order anything you'd like. It's okay." She looked up with tears pooling in her eyes. I don't have enough to pay for anything. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come in." James knelt beside her booth. "Everybody deserves a hot meal," he said softly. "It's on me. No questions asked." She tried to refuse. Her pride battled with her hunger. But eventually, hunger won. With shaky hands, she ordered a simple meal, scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. When it arrived, she ate slowly, like someone who hadn't tasted warmth in a long time. She savored every bite, every sip, and when she was done, she whispered, "Thank you," in a voice so fragile it was nearly lost in the clatter of dishes. James nodded. "Take your time. You're safe here." She left quietly soon after, offering one last look over her shoulder, a look filled with silent gratitude and something else, a spark of promise. James returned to work, never expecting to see her again. But the next day, just as the lunch hour began and the sun bathed the windows of Daisy's Diner in golden warmth, the bell above the door jingled again. James was wiping down a booth when he looked up and paused. It was her, the same woman from yesterday. But this time, she looked different. Gone was the oversized coat. In its place, she wore a clean, simple cardigan and a neat scarf wrapped around her neck. Her hair, though still streaked with silver, was brushed and pulled back into a bun. She looked lighter, more present. Her eyes, though still stormy, now held something new, a glint of purpose. James approached her slowly, a warm smile tugging at his lips. "Back so soon," he said gently. She returned a small smile of her own. "Yes," she said, voice steadier than before. "I owe you more than a thank you. I didn't sleep last night thinking about your kindness." Before James could say anything, she reached in her purse, not the tattered one from yesterday, but a small, zipped handbag. From it, she pulled out a folded envelope. "I want to give you this," she said, placing it on the table. James blinked, taken aback. "Ma'am, that's not necessary. I told you." "No, please," she interrupted. "Let me finish." She took a deep breath. My name is Evelyn. Evelyn Hart. A few days ago, I had nothing. Not just in my pockets, but in my heart. I had lost everything. My husband passed away 3 years ago, and I never really recovered from it. I lost my job, my home. I've been couch surfing, staying in shelters, trying to survive. Yesterday, I hadn't eaten in 2 days. I was cold, tired, alone. Her voice broke for a moment, but she composed herself. And then you reminded me that goodness still exists, that someone still sees me. James was quiet, listening with his whole heart. Evelyn continued. Last night, something changed. I decided to reach out to someone I had cut ties with, my late husband's cousin. She had offered help a year ago, but my pride, it stopped me. But after what you did for me yesterday, I realized pride doesn't fill your stomach. It doesn't warm your soul. James's eyes softened. She picked me up last night, gave me a place to stay, helped me clean up, and this morning, she gave me this envelope to pass on to you. James slowly opened it. Inside was a handwritten note that read, "To the kind soul who reminded Evelyn of her worth. You didn't just feed her, you reignited hope. Please accept this gift, not as charity, but as thanks." Tucked within the note was a check for $1,000. James stared at it, stunned. I can't accept this," he whispered. But Evelyn shook her head. "It's not from me. It's from someone who wants to thank you. And there's more." She looked around the diner, then leaned in. "I spoke to her about you, about what you did. She wants to meet you. She's connected, runs a foundation for community outreach and employment. She's offered you a position, a better job, with benefits, and room to grow." James felt as if time had stopped. He blinked. "Why? I'm just a waiter." Evelyn smiled through moist eyes. "No, James. You're the reason people still believe in miracles." There was a silence between them, deep and profound. No grand music, no clapping crowd. Just two souls, connected by compassion and fate. James looked down at the check again, his hands trembling slightly. And in that moment, he realized the meal he had paid for wasn't just breakfast for a stranger. It was a key, opening a door neither of them knew existed. James stood still in that booth long after Evelyn left the diner, the envelope still clutched in his hands, heart pounding. Everything felt surreal. Was this real life or some dream playing in slow motion? All his life, he had believed in kindness, not because it was always returned, but because it was right. Yet now, for the first time, his kindness was echoing back in ways he couldn't have imagined. He clocked out that evening and walked home under a sky that seemed just a little more golden than usual. Every step he took felt like it was guided, like unseen hands were aligning something much greater behind the scenes. The next morning, he received a call. It was from Evelyn's relative, Catherine Shaw, the founder of the Heartlight Foundation. She wasn't just connected. She was a well-known philanthropist in the city. "I heard about what you did for Evelyn," she said, "and I'd like to offer you something." He hesitated. "I'm listening. I want you to head a new project, Meals of Mercy. We'll fund it. Your job? Oversee teams and restaurants across the city that quietly pay forward meals to those in need. Your story inspired us. You are the heart behind this movement." James's breath caught in his throat. He wasn't used to titles or being the face of anything. He just served food and smiled at strangers. But in that moment, he realized sometimes God hides his angels in aprons and sneakers. He took the job. From that point on, everything began to shift. James wasn't just serving meals anymore. He was delivering hope. He trained waiters across the city to recognize more than orders on paper. He taught them to see pain behind polite smiles, to hear the hunger behind quiet voices, to feel the loneliness hiding in folded napkins. And all the while, Evelyn continued her own healing. She began volunteering at the foundation, using her experience to comfort those who had walked her path. One rainy afternoon, as James and Evelyn stood together handing out hot meals beneath an old train bridge to those with nowhere else to go, Evelyn turned to him and said softly, "Do you know what I see when I look at you now?" James smiled. "What?" "Proof that one small act can rewrite someone's entire story. But this story doesn't stop here." What James didn't know yet, what no one knew, was that this entire journey had been seen by someone else. Someone powerful, someone watching from afar, noting the ripples James was creating in the quiet corners of the city. One evening, after a long shift, James found an envelope slipped under his apartment door. No name, no return address, just a note inside that read, "We've been watching your work. Let's talk about expanding this nationwide. Call this number." He picked up the phone, called the number, and a soft voice answered. "Mr. James? We'd like to fly you to D.C. We're interested in funding your vision." He blinked. "My vision?" "Yes," the voice replied. "You just don't know yet how big it really is." And in that moment, James realized, when you give from the heart, heaven doesn't just applaud, it responds. Not always loudly, not always quickly, but always perfectly timed. James sat in a crisp white chair inside one of the most prestigious boardrooms in Washington, D.C. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, revealing a city buzzing with power, politics, and purpose. But James? He was still just a waiter at heart, humble, quiet, carrying a soul wrapped in kindness. Across the table sat 6 executives from the Harrison Family Foundation, one of the most powerful philanthropic entities in the country. They didn't smile much. They listened. They watched. And then the oldest among them leaned forward, fingers interlocked. "We've read the reports. We've seen the footage. We know your story. And we believe your program, Meals of Mercy, deserves a national platform." James couldn't believe his ears. All of this because of one meal? One $10 decision made from the heart? It seemed unreal. But then again, isn't that how heaven works? It takes the smallest seed, buries it in the soil of kindness, and breathes on it until it becomes a mighty tree of blessings. He signed the papers. Within 6 months, Meals of Mercy was operating in over 23 states. Diners and restaurants began putting up discreet signs. "If you're hungry and struggling, tell us." No questions. You're not alone. Every time a stranger walked into one of those diners, just like Evelyn once had, someone on the inside made sure they didn't leave empty. Meanwhile, Evelyn had turned into a speaker and advocate. She was no longer the woman who wore brokenness like a heavy coat. Now, she wore light. She stood in schools, shelters, and even churches, reminding others of truth many forget. Sometimes, your lowest point is just the doorway heaven uses to bring you into your greatest calling. One day, she was scheduled to speak at a women's center in Baltimore. James joined her, standing quietly in the back as she told their story of the day a stranger saw her, fed her, and unknowingly saved her. And as the applause roared, James watched an entire room rise to their feet. Not for a celebrity, not for a millionaire, but for a moment of compassion that had started at a diner table. But every story like this has someone who still doubts. And James? He wasn't immune. Late one night, after another long day of media interviews and meetings with funders, he sat alone in a hotel room. The city buzzed outside, and in that quiet moment, he prayed, "God, I'm still just me. I don't know how I got here. Am I really the one for this?" The room was silent, but then came a knock at the door. He opened it and found a young man holding a food tray. "Hey," the guy said, sheepish. "I just started working with Meals of Mercy. They told me you were the founder. I just wanted to thank you. You helped my mom a year ago, sir." She didn't say much about it, just said some waiter helped her eat when she couldn't afford it. That gave her hope. James felt something catch in his throat. "Your mom," he whispered. "Was her name?" "Sandra." The young man nodded. "Yeah, she passed last year, but she died with dignity. Because someone like you made her feel seen." And just like that, God answered the prayer. Not with thunder, not with a booming voice from heaven, but through a quiet confirmation, through a face he sent to the door, reminding James that no act of love is ever wasted. Ever. The next morning, James met Evelyn at a diner they hadn't been to before. As they sipped coffee, Evelyn smiled and said, "Do you ever think about how one moment changed everything?" James chuckled. "I think about it every day." And then the waitress came to their table, a young girl who looked nervous and overworked. She spilled a little water, apologized, her hand shaking. Evelyn looked at James. Then she looked at the girl, and gently, she said, "You're doing amazing, sweetheart. Don't worry." The girl blinked in surprise. And right there, right in that moment, James saw it. The cycle had come full circle. One act of kindness, one meal, now living in the hands of another and another and another. Because heaven has this beautiful way of multiplying what the world overlooks. And when you give out of love, not for applause, not for attention, but simply because your soul knows it's right, then miracles begin. Quiet ones, loud ones, and everything in between. Time passed. New restaurants joined the cause. Stories flowed in from across the country. Single moms fed with dignity, runaway teens given warm meals, and even warmer conversations. Elderly folks reminded they were still seen, still loved. But through all the noise, one truth stood tall. It started with one man and one woman, and a meal that heaven multiplied. James never called himself a hero. He still said sir and ma'am to elders and tipped waiters generously, even when they didn't recognize him. And Evelyn, she continued speaking, not for fame, but because she knew her pain had been her path, and her path had become a purpose. People often ask, where was God in my moment of hunger, of despair? And maybe, just maybe, this story answers that. God was there, in the form of a waiter's hand offering a hot meal with no judgment. In the sound of a quiet, it's on me. In the choice to see, not ignore. To serve, not judge. To love, not label. That's where God is. Not always in loud miracles, but in small mercies. In the gentle echo of kindness that ripples through time like the calm waves of a still lake, forever expanding. One morning, while visiting a small-town diner in Georgia, James was asked to say a few words before breakfast. He stood up slowly, eyes soft, smile humble. I was just a waiter, he said. I didn't have power. I didn't have influence. I just had a choice. To see someone who needed love. And I made it. That's all. The room went quiet. He paused, then added, every one of you has the same power. You can save a life without knowing it. You can feed a soul without even trying, just by being kind. A little girl sitting in the corner looked up at her mom and whispered, Mommy, I want to be like him. James heard her and smiled, because heaven's greatest miracles often start that way. In quiet corners, in whispered decisions, in hands that give when no one's looking. You don't have to be rich to change the world. You just have to be ready when love gives you the chance. And you, if you're reading this, you've already been chosen. Chosen to love, chosen to give, chosen to light someone's darkness with your simple, human kindness. Let that sink in, because that moment may come today. And when it does, will you be the one who says, don't worry, it's on me.